When Jesus speaks to your heart, something eternal awakens inside you. It's not like hearing a sermon, reading a book, or listening to a wise man. It's deeper than all of that. His words don't just enter your mind, they ignite your spirit. They bring life where there was despair, courage where there was fear, and hope where everything seemed lost. His voice carries warmth, light, and truth all at once. You don't need anyone to explain it to you, because your heart instantly recognizes that it is the voice of the shepherd calling his sheep by name. When Jesus speaks, time seems to stop. Every worry, every doubt, every distraction fades away. There is only that sacred moment between the Savior and your soul. You may not hear it with your physical ears, but you feel it with a certainty that cannot be described. It's as if heaven itself leans close and breathes life into your weary heart. No translation is needed because the message is written in the language of divine love, pure, powerful, and personal. When the voice of Jesus reaches you, it doesn't argue, it doesn't pressure, it doesn't condemn. It simply speaks truth in such a way that your spirit knows it is right. It might be a word of comfort when you are grieving, a word of direction when you are lost, or a gentle conviction when you are straying. His voice does not confuse. It clarifies. It does not accuse. It redeems. It does not break the soul. It restores it. When Jesus speaks, his tone is filled with grace and authority, the kind of authority that makes demons tremble yet makes sinners weep with relief. In a noisy world filled with endless voices, voices from the media, from people, from our own restless thoughts, it's easy to lose the sound of that still, small voice. But when Jesus speaks, you know, there's a quiet power in it, something that cuts through all the chaos and speaks straight to your need. You can be standing in a crowd, but his voice will single you out as if you were the only one he came for. That is the personal nature of his love. When he speaks to you, not just to humanity in general, but to you. When Jesus speaks to your heart, he often doesn't say long sentences. Sometimes it's one word. Sometimes it's a feeling, a nudge, a deep peace that doesn't make sense in your situation. But that's how he works. He bypasses the intellect and speaks straight to the soul. Because human reasoning needs explanation, but divine revelation needs only surrender. When you open your heart, you make room for his whisper, and in that whisper, you find everything you've been searching for. There are times when you've prayed for answers and heard nothing. You've wondered if God is silent. But then, suddenly, in a quiet moment, his presence floods your heart. It might not come in thunder or lightning, but in a single, unmistakable sense that he is with you. When he speaks, confusion disappears, because his voice carries peace. Not ordinary peace, the peace that surpasses understanding. You can't explain it to others, because it's not a feeling from this world. It's the peace of heaven touching earth, the assurance that no matter what happens, you are held by the hands that shape the stars. When Jesus speaks, miracles happen, not just outwardly, but inwardly. The greatest miracle is not a blind man seeing or a lame man walking, but a cold heart melting in the warmth of his love. When his voice reaches you, bitterness turns into forgiveness, pride turns into humility, and sorrow turns into strength. He doesn't just change your situation, he changes you. And that transformation is something that no one can take away. There are people who have never read the Bible, never entered a church, yet when Jesus speaks to them, they weep as if a part of them has just been found. That's because his voice calls out to the deepest part of every human soul. You were created to know that voice. From the moment of your creation, your spirit was designed to respond to it. That's why when Jesus speaks, no explanation is necessary. The heart immediately says, "Yes, Lord." Even in the hardest seasons of life, when prayers seem unanswered, when faith feels small, his voice comes not to scold, but to remind you, "I am here." And in that moment, the storm loses its power. You realize that his presence is greater than your problem. When he speaks, he doesn't always remove the mountain, but he gives you the strength to climb it. He doesn't always calm the storm outside, but he always calms the storm inside. That is the power of his communication, quiet yet unstoppable. When you walk with Jesus long enough, you begin to recognize his tone. It's not the loudest voice, but it's the truest. It's the one that doesn't flatter your ego, but awakens your spirit. When you hear it, it brings conviction, but never condemnation. It exposes darkness, but never leaves you without light. The voice of Jesus always leads you closer to love, closer to truth, closer to life. And the beauty of it is this: You don't have to be perfect to hear him. You don't have to earn his attention. He speaks to the humble, the broken, the seeking. He speaks to those who think they're too far gone. He speaks to the one who cries in secret, the one who's tired of pretending to be strong. His voice finds its way into the deepest wounds and begins to heal what no human touch could ever reach. Sometimes he speaks through scripture, sometimes through a friend, sometimes through silence. But no matter how he chooses to speak, his message is always the same: you are loved. You are not alone. You still have a purpose. That is the language of heaven, and every heart knows it when it hears it. When Jesus speaks, walls fall down without sound, chains break without force, and lives are changed without explanation. You don't need translation because his words bypass the barriers of language, culture, and logic. They flow directly into the human heart, awakening the divine connection that was there all along. His voice doesn't need to be understood. It needs to be received. And when you receive it, everything about you begins to shift. You see the world differently. You love differently. You live differently. Because once you've heard the voice of Jesus in your heart, no other voice can satisfy you again. It becomes your compass, your comfort, your source of strength. And though the world may not understand it, without a doubt, he has spoken, and your heart has heard. When Jesus speaks to your heart, everything within you recognizes the sound of truth. It is not something that you reason out, nor something you analyze. It is something you simply know. It pierces through confusion and uncertainty with a power that cannot be imitated. The moment his voice touches your spirit, you realize that you are standing on holy ground, not because of where you are, but because of who is speaking. You realize that heaven is not far away. It is right there within the whisper of his presence. His words may be few, but they carry eternal weight. One word from Jesus can undo years of pain, lift the heaviest burden, and awaken hope that had long been buried. His voice is unlike any other. It does not shout to compete with the noise of the world, yet it commands attention. It does not flatter the proud, yet it lifts the humble. It does not come dressed in human eloquence, but in divine simplicity. You might not even be able to explain to someone else what you heard or how you heard it, but your heart will testify that it was him. Because when Jesus speaks, your heart feels seen, your soul feels known, and your entire being feels loved. There are people who have chased after meaning in all the wrong places, through success, relationships, or possessions, and yet the emptiness remains. But the moment Jesus speaks to that aching void, the search ends. Because his voice doesn't just fill the silence, it fills the soul. He doesn't give you explanations that satisfy your curiosity. He gives you truth that satisfies your spirit. That's why no translation is ever needed. When his voice enters your heart, you understand instantly that this is not human wisdom. It is divine revelation. When Jesus speaks, he doesn't just tell you who he is. He reminds you who you are. The world calls you by your mistakes, but he calls you by your name. The world tells you what you have failed to be, but he tells you what he created you to be. His voice restores identity. It reminds you that you are loved not because of what you've done, but because of who he is. And when that truth sinks into your heart, it changes everything. You begin to see yourself through his eyes, no longer condemned but redeemed, no longer lost but found. There are moments when you are at the edge of despair, ready to give up, and suddenly his words come, soft but sure, gentle but strong. Do not be afraid, I am with you. Those words may not change your situation instantly, but they change you. They lift your gaze above the storm and fix it upon the one who walks upon the waters. His voice doesn't always promise the absence of trouble, but it guarantees his presence through it. That is the difference between the voice of Jesus and every other voice in the world. His words carry life. When Jesus speaks to your heart, he speaks with perfect timing. You may think he's late, but he never is. He knows the exact moment when your heart is ready to hear. Sometimes you pray and wait, wondering why he doesn't answer right away. But when the moment comes and his voice breaks the silence, you realize that he was never absent. He was preparing you to receive what your spirit needed most. His silence is not neglect, it's preparation for revelation. His voice can reach you anywhere, whether in a crowded room or in a lonely wilderness. It can come to you in the middle of a busy day or in the quiet hours of the night. It can come while you're listening to a sermon, reading a verse, or simply sitting in tears. He does not need a pulpit or a platform. He only needs an open heart. When he finds that openness, he speaks life into it, and a transformation begins. His words have a way of healing without explanation. They go where no medicine, no advice, no comfort from man can reach. They touch the hidden wounds, the ones you've carried silently, the ones no one else knows about. When he speaks to those places, there is no need for translation, because your heart instantly knows the meaning. It's the voice that says, "You are forgiven," and the guilt melts away. It's the voice that says, "You are mine," and loneliness loses its grip. It's the voice that says, "Peace, be still," and suddenly the storm inside you grows calm. Even when he corrects you, his voice is filled with love. It doesn't crush, it convicts. It doesn't humiliate, it humbles. His correction is not to shame you, but to draw you closer to himself. When he speaks discipline, you still feel his compassion. That is why people who truly hear his voice are never the same again. Because every word he speaks carries both truth and grace. Enough truth to expose you, and enough grace to redeem you. When Jesus speaks, his words don't fade. They stay with you. Days, months, even years later, you'll still remember what he said in that sacred moment. And whenever life becomes uncertain again, his words echo within you, reminding you of what is eternal. That is how his voice works. It becomes the anchor of your soul. It gives you stability when everything around you shakes. There's something deeply personal about the way he communicates. He knows exactly how to reach you, how to speak in a way that only you will understand. For some, it comes through a passage of scripture that suddenly glows with new meaning. For others, it comes through a worship song that feels like it was written for their heart alone. Sometimes it's not even words. It's a deep sense of assurance that you are not walking alone. That's how gentle he is. He doesn't need to explain himself. His presence is explanation enough. And when you have heard him once, you begin to crave that voice again. Nothing else compares to it. The voices of the world grow faint because you've tasted something divine. You begin to live not for applause, not for approval, but for that one quiet whisper that says, "Well done." You realize that hearing him is more precious than being understood by anyone else. Because when Jesus speaks to your heart, you need no validation, no translation, and no confirmation, just his word, and that is enough. The voice of Jesus is the voice of creation itself. It is the same voice that said, "Let there be light," and light appeared. It is the same voice that called Lazarus from the tomb, and death released him. When that voice speaks to your spirit, things that were dead begin to live again. Dreams resurrect, faith rekindles, love is reborn. The sound of his presence awakens everything that has been asleep within you. And when you rise not because you tried harder, but because his voice lifted you. This is why no translation is ever needed. The voice of Jesus is not limited by culture, language, or education. It is universal, eternal, and deeply intimate. It doesn't need explanation because it speaks directly to the part of you that was created to know him. And when he speaks, your heart understands, responds, and finds rest in the one whose words never fail. When Jesus speaks to your heart, the world around you may not change instantly, but the world within you does. Suddenly, what once felt impossible begins to feel possible. What once seemed hopeless starts to shine with new light. His voice carries a strength that no circumstance can silence. It is not like the voices that come and go. It stays, it sustains, it strengthens. You find yourself walking through the same storm, but no longer afraid of it, because his words echo inside you, reminding you that he is still in control. His voice doesn't always tell you what you want to hear, but it always tells you what you need to hear. There are moments when his silence feels unbearable, but even then, there is a hidden message in it. Sometimes his silence says, "Wait." Sometimes it says, "Trust me." And sometimes it says, "You already know what I've spoken before, stand on that." His voice is not bound by sound or time. It speaks through peace, through conviction, through assurance that goes beyond logic. There are times when Jesus speaks through what seems ordinary. A sunrise that reminds you of new beginnings. A child's laughter that reminds you of joy. A stranger's kindness that reminds you of grace. His language is not limited to words. He speaks through moments, through nature, through the stillness of your own breath. When you learn to listen with your heart, you realize that he has been speaking all along. When Jesus speaks, the noise of fear loses its grip. The heart that was once anxious begins to rest. The mind that was filled with confusion starts to clear. You don't have to strive to understand him, you simply have to yield. His words find their way into the cracks of your being and fill them with life. He speaks in ways that restore what you thought was gone forever. And as his voice grows familiar, it becomes your guiding sound. It leads you through uncertainty with quiet confidence. You may not see the whole path ahead, but his voice is enough for the next step. You realize that obedience becomes easier when you know who is speaking. You stop doubting his goodness because you've heard his tone. It's the tone of love, of patience, of mercy that never runs out. When Jesus speaks to your heart, you realize that no translation is needed because his words are not meant to be analyzed. They are meant to be lived. They become the melody that carries you through every season, the light that never goes out, the truth that no darkness can deny. And when you hear that voice, you know that nothing in this world can ever separate you from the one who speaks so personally, so tenderly, and so powerfully to your soul. So when Jesus speaks to your heart, listen. Do not rush, do not reason, just receive. Because one whisper from him is greater than 1,000 voices from the world. His words bring life to what is dead, peace to what is broken, and purpose to what is lost. The world may offer noise, but only Jesus offers truth. When he speaks, hearts awaken, faith ignites, and everything begins to change from the inside out. You don't need translation, you need surrender. For the language of Jesus is the language of love. And when love himself speaks, every heart understands.